All right, the next thing you're going to do is just this side right here. I'm pretty sure yours is two-sided, but we're only looking at this side. And we're going to have 2 groups of 3 and 1 group of 2. And I want you to come up and pick a card, please. That will determine whose group you're in today. So come on up and pick a card. All right, you have a picture. Here is the picture. And this is just like, maybe you want to have your notes. This is just like the painted towers. So these last 2 problems have nothing to do with it. Okay, this is what the picture is about. So this is the part you're working on right now. Just this part over here. Okay, this doesn't have anything to do with it. I am going to give you 15 minutes. All right, so I had you pick cards today because I like you to step out of your comfort zone and work with others. Sometimes I allow you to pick your own groups. Other times I like you to work with others that you don't normally work with, because that's real life. You go to a job, you're not always going to be with your friends. You're going to have to be around people that you may feel uncomfortable, but the more you do it, the more at ease you get at it. So on this right here, it was a real struggle to get going on it, which is fine. That's why I do these activities, because I really want you to think about what's going on. And I would say that the first thing is you need to fill in your table of values, because that data is what you use for everything else. Some people tried to go right, actually, I think just about everybody tried to go the function rule first, which is harder to do. And it's not that it can't be done, it's just that it's harder to do it that way. So you should always try to get some data in your table. And so make sure you're really looking at what they're given. Maybe they say case number, maybe they say something else, maybe they don't say anything at all, maybe they don't have anything there. And then you're going to have to come up with what you want to call that. I could call that case 1 or diagram 1. So they're not always going to tell you what they're calling it. So you may have to come up with that variable yourself. And so diagram 1 has 2 squares, and that should be the language that's in all of this right here. That's one thing that I'm not seeing for everybody. I think only one group actually used variables that represented the picture. Everybody else used X and Y. This is a specific problem, and you need to use specific variables. So I'm going to say that this is D for diagram number, and this is S or B for the squares or blocks. Those are the variables that I should be using throughout the entire problem. I only use X and Y when it's a generic problem. When we had worksheets that we do, and it's not about a picture. It's not about something specific. So diagram 1 has 2. Actually, I want to put that here. Diagram 1 has 2. Diagram 2 has 5. And diagram 3 has 8.
What are your X?
Squares. Yep, B is good. I'm not going to mark you wrong for the variables that you pick, as long as they make sense to the picture. As long as it's something that's in the picture, then you're not going to go wrong. All right, and then the next thing would be, what does X represent? X represents the diagram number. Y represents the squares. I know that you have domain and range there, but X is right here, and this is Y. I mean, X is about the diagram number. This is specific. You're going to have a quiz on this. You're going to have 4 questions to answer. 4 views of a function is a table, a graph, a function rule, and a description. That is what you'll have to do every time. And there may be other added questions, but 4 views of a function is always about a table, graph, function rule, and description. All right, now they're asking me my domain. I am going to put 0 in here. And then I can figure out what my 0 number is. I just got to look at the pattern. I see that it's going up by 3. So if it's going up by 3, then I could go down by 3. 2 minus 3 is -1. And so I told you that in your notes, if you highlighted it, I only saw one book that was highlighted. I told you that if it was highlighted, that you'd very easily be able to write a function rule, which we'll get there. So my domain, because of the numbers I have, is 0, 1, 2, 3. You may have 4, 5. It depends on what's in your table. And then my range is -1, 2, 5, and 8, based on my table. I could have filled in another one. I didn't have to. All right, writing the function rule. I know that it's supposed to be y equals something of s. So squares is dependent upon diagram number. So squares equal something of the diagram number. This number is one of the numbers that go in my chart, in my function rule. And this is one of my numbers in my function rule. And so I highlighted it just like that in the painted towers. And I tried to stress that if you had that in your notes, that it would be very easy for you moving forward. Everybody came up with the function rule, which is fine. That was great. You didn't need to use this crutch right here, but there are going to be times when it's going to be difficult. Today was a little bit more difficult. It's going to keep getting that way. So if you have a pattern, you know that how it's changing the same as what's being multiplied, and then whatever this number is, it goes right there. And then graphing, you probably did not put down that this was about the diagram number, and this was the squares. That's part of graphing. Your axes need to be labeled, so you will lose points on that. And then I'm sure that you graphed just fine. Some people graphed 0, some people didn't. Not a big deal.
What was the bottom? Just diagram number?
Yeah, because that's what my table was about, diagram number and squares. X was the diagram number and Y was the squares. So I get a lot of joy out of Honors Algebra 2 when they do things like this. Like I said, they're just finishing up right now. They're taking a test on your entire year's worth of linear functions, and they're very good at it. That's just how it is, because you're going to see it in geometry, so it gets reinforced there. And then when you come back in Algebra 2, we do a review on it. So it's knowledge that is not hard for them at all. They've been doing it for years, so it's very easy for them to take this test that they're going to take. But it was just amazing to hear them, as it was for you guys this morning, to hear you guys talking about math. They actually came up, which is what I was going to have you do, but we're running out of time. And each person from their group described how they got their function rule and their data. Those are the two things. And it was really great. Only one group actually got the verbal description 100% correct. Everything that you guys have down is correct, but it's not really talking about the picture. The verbal description, I'm supposed to be able to see this. Most of you said, y equals 3 times x minus 1, right? You're just talking about the equation, which I'm not going to mark wrong, but a person who's critically thinking actually is talking about what the picture is doing. What would be the verbal description? Because this is where I got my equation from, is from the picture. So I should be able to verbally talk about that in the verbal description. And so what is actually happening in the picture? I start with 2. And then what happens? And yes, and so here's my 2 original right here. And then I have 3, and then another 3 being added. And so that would be plus 3 plus 3. And so one of the groups would say something like, as the diagram number is increasing, the number of squares is increasing by 3. That's really describing the picture right here. And so I will probably give extra credit for anybody who actually is describing what the picture is doing. I won't mark it wrong when you say squares equal 3 times the diagram number minus 1. I won't mark it wrong unless you have X and Y there. I'll have to take off points for that. You got to make sure that you're using the correct variables. And then if you want extra credit, you would actually describe the picture. As the diagram number increases by 1, the squares increase by 3. All right, your homework, I'm going to actually have to take a post off that I had on there for a project that we're going to be doing that is going to count as a test grade. And so I'll save that for next class. Your homework is to finish this right here and do the other side. That is your homework, is to finish this worksheet. And you still have 5 minutes to get some work done, so you can probably crank out at least the first side right now.